Alright, everybody, for today's Critical Thought, we are talking about the RP of the RPG genre. As role-playing is an essential aspect of this, it's been there since the beginning, and it is something, as a developer, you need to take into consideration when you are building the world's rules and space for your games. As one of the first major points I discussed in my upcoming book, Game Design Deep Dive Role-Playing Game, shameless plug, was on the introduction and the beginning of the tabletop RPG genre. And since the very literal inception of it, role-playing has been a major aspect of playing a role-playing game, hence the role-playing part of it. And while the importance of it can wax or wane depending upon the person behind the gamepad, again, for someone like me, as long as the character has brown hair, brown eyes, that's good enough for me. Well, I'm sure a few of you watching this have probably come up with entire short stories of your character and everything about how they look, how they talk, and how they behave. But role-playing is something that is not only instrumental to the idea of playing a tabletop RPG or any kind of role-playing, but it is a very healthy activity for people who enjoy this. As we've said before, the act of role-playing, when it comes to these games, has been around since, well, very much the beginning of the genre. But as we've seen, as we've talked about in terms of the greater history of video games, the idea of playing video games was considered a toy for, well, about 20 or so years. It really wasn't until like the middle of the 2000s and especially into the 2010s that the stigma has officially gone away. So for adults looking for entertainment that is not of the usual variety, we had the idea of tabletop role-playing. And this is, again, this idea of you creating you in this game. It could be just you in real life, an idealized version of you, or just something completely outside your social norms or what you're normally like. And this kind of creative thinking and just being able to inhabit someone else is very healthy when it comes to imagination, and again, being able to experience something that you yourself would probably never be able to. And this is something that most of you will probably never get to experience in real life, unless, of course, we get some literal Dungeons and Dragons. But as we approach a year 2020 New Game Plus 4, who knows what is going to happen. And being able to interact with games in this respect is something that for the longest time, especially again, we look at the grand scope of the game industry, has been something that was kind of exclusive to pen, paper, and tabletop games. Because the very idea of having enough room in a game to allow people to personalize the world or the characters and how they are treated in it is oftentimes beyond the scope of a game developer. And when we entered the 90s and what will become the kind of golden age of CRPG design, a lot of what made those early CRPGs, or again the 90s era, the likes of Baldur's Gate, Fallout, Neverwinter Nights, and so on, so popular, was that this was the first time that a game would really be able to push this idea of being like playing a pen and paper RPG or designing a character, and then allowing the game to kind of take over as Dungeon Master and keeping track of all the rules, dice rolls, and so on. And when we talk about role-playing in this respect, while some of this will have aspects in terms of game design and customization, it is still a major aspect when it comes to personalization of a game. And just as a quick recap, customization refers to all gameplay affecting choices that a player can make. Personalization is all the aesthetics and kind of character design that is not gameplay affecting that a player can make. So this is when we talk about how your character looks, what kind of clothing do they wear, their hairstyle, body height, body type, and many, many more. And as we've said before, personalization is one of those things that it can never run out. People will always want more, and it's oftentimes where a lot of modders of games will put out lots and lots of voice acting packs, cosmetic packs, new graphical effects, anything that someone can do to inhabit or make a character feel like it is inhabiting the role that the player wants, is where we see this idea of role-playing become such a big point and big business in some cases. When we talk about the rise and fall of the MMO genre in the 2000s, the major marketing tagline that people made was, hey, do you like insert IP here? You can now be in this one. You can be a Jedi or a wizard or I don't know, whatever is like the name of the person, the Matrix, and all those other ones. And all these games, of course, had role-playing servers and people who just wanted to be in it. And this is something that we have seen, again, become more and more popularized among the tabletop audiences. That if you have a group of people who just want to hang out and talk in this role or just inhabit this world, you don't need to have this elaborate campaign of going on this death quest to fight an elder god and all your characters could possibly die. You could maybe just have the equivalent of, I don't know, fantasy characters going on the equivalent of a coach plane ride somewhere. In fact, any people come up with a scenario like that for one of their games, let me know in the comments down below. So what does this mean from a gameplay point of view? As we said, the act of role-playing and personalization is not often something that is directly related to the gameplay respect, but character creation, character roles, character personalities, and backgrounds, and so on, these are very much aspects that can fit from a game design point of view. And a lot of people will argue either for or against this. And there's definitely some pros and cons to each one. If you remove the entire character background or character creator as part of the gameplay, we made this entirely personalization, it will basically remove any kind of a weight or the anxiety of making sure that their character perfectly min-maxes in that world. But in the other respect, what makes these choices so important and so meaningful is how is the game going to treat them? Being an orc is going to be the same, or would that be the same as being an elf? Or being insert D&D class, because I have not played any D&D, and I still haven't played Baldur's Gate 3 at the moment of recording this. But you do get the idea that in order for choices to matter, there must be some element of weight to them. Even if it is something as simple as a character addressing you as whatever, based on whatever your profession is, your background, etc. These are aspects that allow your character to exist in this world. The very worst thing that you can do when it comes to role-playing and personalization is if you let someone create a character, no matter how they look, feel, aesthetics, whatever, and then you use generic models for cutscenes or dialogues, it completely betrays the notion of personalization and role-playing. And yes, when I say every kind of character you can make, I do mean every. As we've seen people make these kinds of, I don't know, like crazy eldritch mutant characters out of the Street Fighter 6 character creator. And that is perfectly fine. Again, the act and the point of role-playing is to allow the player to create a character that resonates with them. Whether it resonates them on a personal level, or they just got really bored one day and thought, why don't we have a character who has an eye over here, ear down there, they have like 12 fingers, their body is like a hunchback, and they can also do perfect martial arts moves. Who knows? But, again, when we talk about role-playing, as RPGs have evolved, and one of the aspects that is definitely standing out or making waves with Baldur's Gate 3 is this idea of let the player's choices guide the story. And there is a greater, I do mean a far greater discussion we had about having the world respond to your choices. And there's a lot that goes into that. But for this basic level what we're talking about here, if the player creates a character in a specific way, or they have a specific way of kind of wanting this character to behave, you don't want the game to override it, and oftentimes you don't want to necessarily punish or explicitly reward the player for doing something. If someone wants to play the game as a chaotic neutral way, just full on evil, full on good, and they're creating this character around that role, the game needs to be accommodating for that. As we've said, one of the worst things you can do about choices in any game is to establish the de facto wrong choice. That one thing you should never do, you should never take it for your character, you should never use it in conversations, because that can be seen as a betrayal by the game to the player. That you gave me this choice, and now you're saying that it was all a trap or not working. Now that doesn't necessarily mean you can have weird choices, or choices that are meant to be harder, or just mess with the game in an unusual way. I was talking about this in one of the comments, but like something like in Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines, one of the kind of background traits you could pick was for the class of vampires that I think they're like insane, or like something's not right about them, and they can't talk to like normal people, right? But they can have conversations with inanimate objects. Is it the most optimal, best way of playing that game? Probably not. Can it be a whole lot of fun to walk around and have deeply philosophical conversations with a signpost or a fire hydrant? I would assume so. Let me know what you think about that in the comments down below. The point is that if you want the player to care about the game, care about their choices, and as part of our conversation, care about the character they created, then the character needs to be able to inhabit that world. And any times that you override the player's choices, override how they built this character to basically tell something else, that comes off as being, again, this act of betrayal. And not every game is going to have to worry about this. If we're talking about a game where you're playing as a named character or as a already defined character, that's kind of par for the course. But you don't want to give the player all these choices, let them make, let's say, a very passive, very introverted character, and then in every cutscene they sound like a frat boy, or they're just like screaming and yelling at everyone when they're having talks. Because again, the more choices you put into a game, whether it is from a customization or a personalization point of view, the more you need to accommodate that within the game itself. And as, again, another interesting point, that takes a lot of work and it takes a lot of time. And I'm assuming a lot of Larian's development of Baldur's Gate 3 is fleshing out any and every possible choice in that game. And I'm curious to see where like end play times are going to end up for a few of the people I know who are enjoying it. To wrap up our discussion, personalization and the act of role-playing is a very healthy hobby for everyone involved. And it is something that, while it has waxed and waned in terms of CRPG, it has always been an inherent aspect of the tabletop genre, and more indie developers are embracing this idea of letting the player inhabit a character and letting that kind of play out within the game. This can even be done in a more explicit sense by games that deal with a very unusual or not exactly the most like game expressive hobby. What about a game that's just you, I don't know, walking dogs for a living, mailing letters, running a cat cafe, running a library, doing things that, again, aren't going to lead to the end of the world as we know it. Well, unless, of course, your dog gets off the leash, then trouble can ensue there. But you do get the point that role-playing is about the player being able to do something that is not going, or in many cases, not explicitly tied to gameplay. But the games that do handle this well will still allow those choices to matter, whether it is something very small, as someone saying, "How do you do, sir?" or "How do you do, ma'am?" or something larger, as where a character can go, where that character wants to go, is dependent upon their background and choices. So for those of you watching this, I am curious, because this is something that I'm not too versed in myself, but can you name games that did an exceptionally well done job of allowing role-playing or the player to create a character that the world of the game itself will respond to, without kind of overriding the player's choices or their actions? Let me know in the comments down below. That's going to do it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. Be sure to do the YouTubing stuff people tell you to do. If you're interested in more of my thoughts on design, check out my books wherever they are sold. Visit our Discord and Patreon, and come back for daily discussions on game design here, and on game wisdom, where you some of the art and science of games.